The rain hammered against the gallery windows so hard that Sophie Parks wondered if the glass might actually shatter, which seemed fitting given how her entire life felt like it was breaking apart in slow motion. She stood alone in the contemporary art gallery she managed, staring at an abstract painting that probably cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. The artist reception had ended an hour ago, but Sophie had sent her assistant home early. She needed the silence, needed to think about how she was going to tell her landlord that rent would be late again this month. The gallery door chimed, startling her. She turned to find a man stepping inside, his expensive charcoal suit damp from the downpour. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly from the rain and eyes so intensely blue they seemed almost unreal under the gallery lights. "I'm sorry, we're closed," Sophie said, though her voice came out softer than she intended. Something about him made her forget her rehearsed professional tone. "I know." His voice was deep, controlled. "I saw you through the window. I've been trying to work up the courage to come in for the past 20 minutes. Sophie blinked. "Courage, it's just an art gallery." "It's not the gallery I'm nervous about." He moved closer, water dripping from his jacket onto the polished concrete floor. "I'm Vincent Sorenson." The name hit her like a physical thing. Vincent Sorenson owned half the commercial real estate in the city, including the building this gallery occupied. She'd seen his picture in business magazines, though none of those photographs had captured the intensity he radiated in person. "Oh." Sophie's hand went automatically to smooth her hair, suddenly aware of how she must look after a long day. "Mr. Sorenson, is there a problem with the lease?" "No, nothing like that." He seemed to struggle with his next words, which was strange for someone who commanded boardrooms full of powerful people. "I've been attending your exhibitions for months, always in the crowd, never introducing myself. I know how that sounds." Sophie's heart began beating faster. "You've been coming to our shows, every single one since July. The modern sculpture exhibit, the local artist showcase, that incredible photography series last month." He took another step closer, and Sophie caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with rain. "You have this way of talking about art that makes people see it differently. I've watched you transform someone's entire perspective on a piece they walked past initially without a second glance." Her cheeks flushed. "That's my job. It's more than that. You genuinely love it. You light up when you're explaining the story behind a painting or the technique an artist used." Vincent's expression softened. "I bought the building next door last month just to have an excuse to walk past here more often. My business partners thought I was insane." Sophie didn't know what to say. Men didn't do things like that for her. She was too quiet, too ordinary, too absorbed in her world of paintings and sculptures. Her last boyfriend had left because he said dating her was like dating a ghost who only came alive around artwork. "That's a little intense," she finally managed. "I know, I'm not usually like this." Vincent ran a hand through his wet hair. "I've built a business empire by being calculated and strategic, but with you I can't think straight. Will you have dinner with me?" Sophie wanted to say yes. God, she wanted to, but reality crashed back in, heavy and cold. "Mr. Sorenson, I appreciate this, but you don't know me. You've seen me doing my job. That's not real." "Then let me get to know the real you." "You'll get bored of me," she warned, the words spilling out before she could stop them. It was what she always said, what she always believed. "I'm not exciting. I spend my weekends visiting museums and reading art history books. I eat the same 3 meals on rotation because I can't afford anything else and I'm too tired to experiment. My apartment has holes in the walls I cover with posters. I'm barely keeping my life together." Vincent's response was immediate and certain. "I've been obsessed for months already and I don't even know your name, Sophie. Sophie Parks. Sophie." He said it like he was tasting something precious. "Have dinner with me. One dinner. If you're right and I'm bored, we'll part as friends, but I don't think that's going to happen." She should say no. Every practical bone in her body screamed to say no, but when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "Okay, one dinner." The smile that broke across Vincent's face transformed him from intimidating businessman to something almost boyish. Tomorrow night. I'll pick you up at 7. Sophie gave him her address, still half convinced this was some kind of elaborate dream brought on by stress and too much coffee. Vincent left with one last lingering look that made her stomach flip, and then Sophie was alone again in the gallery, staring at her reflection in the darkened windows. What had she just agreed to? The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Sophie tried to focus on inventory and preparing for next week's exhibit, but her mind kept drifting to Vincent. She'd looked him up online during her lunch break and immediately regretted it. The man was worth hundreds of millions. He'd started his real estate empire at 23 with nothing but a business loan and relentless ambition. He was 32 now, 9 years older than her, and regularly appeared on lists of the city's most eligible bachelors. What could he possibly want with her? By 6:30 that evening, Sophie had changed outfits 4 times and was close to tears. Her closet was full of professional clothes for the gallery and casual weekend wear, none of it appropriate for dinner with a millionaire. She finally settled on a simple black dress she'd bought for gallery openings, paired with the only nice shoes she owned that didn't have scuffed heels. The buzzer rang at exactly 7. Sophie grabbed her coat and headed downstairs, not wanting Vincent to see the cramped studio apartment she could barely afford. But when she emerged from the building, he was already out of his sleek black car, holding an umbrella even though the rain had stopped. "You look beautiful," he said, and the way he looked at her made Sophie believe it might actually be true. The restaurant was the kind of place Sophie had only read about in magazines. The host greeted Vincent by name and led them to a private corner table where soft candlelight flickered across white linens. Sophie felt completely out of her depth. "You're nervous," Vincent observed after they'd ordered. "Is it that obvious?" "Only because I'm watching you so closely." He leaned back in his chair, somehow making the formal setting feel more intimate. "Tell me something real, Sophie, not small talk, something that matters to you." Sophie took a sip of water, gathering her thoughts. "I wanted to be an artist when I was younger. I spent all of high school convinced I'd go to art school and become a painter. But I wasn't good enough, not really. I could see brilliance in others' work, understand it, articulate it, but I couldn't create it myself. It broke my heart for a while." "Is that why you became a gallery manager?" "I fell into it, honestly. Started as an intern during college, worked my way up. Turns out I have a gift for connecting people with art, even if I can't make it myself." She paused. "That probably sounds pathetic." "It sounds honest." Vincent's gaze never wavered from her face. "I wanted to be an architect. Spent years designing buildings in my head, imagining skylines I'd create. But I didn't have the education, the connections, or the money. So I found another way to shape the city. I buy the buildings instead of designing them. Sometimes I lie awake at night wondering what I might have created if circumstances had been different." Sophie hadn't expected that kind of vulnerability from him. "Do you regret it?" "No, but I understand the ache of setting aside one dream for a different reality." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "Tell me what you love most about art." And somehow, with that simple question, the nervousness faded. Sophie found herself talking about color theory and composition, about how a single painting could capture an emotion so perfectly it made your chest hurt. Vincent listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed he actually cared about her answers. He told her about the buildings he owned, the neighborhoods he was working to revitalize, his vision for the city's future. They talked through 3 courses and dessert, closing down the restaurant without realizing how much time had passed. "I need to confess something," Vincent said as they walked to his car. The night air was cool and clean after the rain. "I almost didn't come to the gallery yesterday. I'd convinced myself I was being ridiculous, that my partners were right to call me obsessed. But then I thought about never hearing you laugh again, never seeing the way your whole face changes when you're excited about an artist's technique, and I couldn't accept that." Sophie stopped walking. Vincent, I still don't understand this. You could have anyone. Models, socialites, people who fit into your world. I don't want people who fit into my world, I want you. He turned to face her fully. I want someone who gets so absorbed in explaining the symbolism in a painting that she forgets to eat. Someone who wears the same lucky earrings to every exhibition opening because she thinks they bring good fortune to the artists. Someone who straightens frames obsessively even though no one else notices they're crooked. You've really been paying attention to every detail for months. He moved closer and Sophie's breath caught. I'm not bored yet. Are you willing to risk another date? She should be cautious. She should protect herself. But standing there with Vincent looking at her like she was the most fascinating thing in the city, Sophie found herself willing to take the risk. Yes, she whispered. Vincent's smile was worth every moment of fear. He drove her home, walked her to her building's entrance, and kissed her cheek with a gentleness that made her knees weak. Sophie floated up the stairs to her apartment, already counting the hours until she'd see him again. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and late-night conversations. Vincent showed up at the gallery with coffee exactly how she liked it. They had dinner after work, went to art museums on weekends, spent hours talking about everything and nothing. He held her hand like it was precious, kissed her like she was the air he needed to breathe. Sophie kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Vincent to realize she wasn't worth this intensity. But instead, he seemed to fall deeper. He started keeping a change of clothes at his office so he could meet her straight from work without making her wait. He learned the names of her favorite artists and bought pieces for his personal collection based on her recommendations. He listened when she talked about her dreams of maybe opening her own gallery someday, and instead of dismissing it as fantasy, he asked detailed questions about her business plan. I'm scared, Sophie admitted one night as they sat on a bench in the sculpture garden behind the museum. It was late, well past closing, but Vincent had made a donation large enough that they'd given him a key. This feels too good to be real. What scares you most? Vincent's arm was around her shoulders, keeping her warm against the October chill. That I'm going to wake up. That you're going to realize I'm just ordinary, that this is all some kind of extended fantasy that ends with me alone again. She turned to look at him. People don't do this for me, Vincent. They don't pursue me or stay interested or look at me the way you do. Then they were idiots who didn't deserve you. Vincent cupped her face in his hands. Sophie, I think about you constantly. When I'm in meetings, I'm wondering what you're doing at the gallery. When I'm negotiating deals, I'm planning where to take you for dinner. You've become the center of my entire world and I've never been happier. But why? I'm still not exciting. I'm still the same person who eats boring meals and has holes in her walls and can barely afford, she stopped abruptly, but it was too late. Barely afford what? Vincent's voice was gentle but firm. Sophie sighed. She'd been careful not to talk about money around him, not wanting to seem like she was after his wealth, but exhaustion and emotion made her honest. Everything. Rent, food, transportation. The gallery pays me enough to survive, but not enough to actually live. I've been eating ramen and rice for 3 weeks because I had to buy new shoes for work. My landlord raised the rent again and I don't know how I'm going to cover it. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to think that's why I'm here. I didn't want money to be part of this. Tears pricked at her eyes. This thing between us, whatever it is, it's the most real thing I've ever felt. I didn't want to ruin it by making it about your money, Sophie. Vincent pulled her closer. The fact that you've been struggling this whole time and didn't ask me for anything only makes me love you more. Her heart stopped. What? I love you. I'm in love with you. I have been since that first dinner when you talked for 20 minutes about the emotional impact of abstract expressionism. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. And I'm going to help you with your rent whether you like it or not, because the thought of you eating ramen while I take you to expensive restaurants makes me sick. Vincent, let me finish. I know you're independent. I know you're proud. but loving someone means taking care of them when they need it. You can pay me back if it makes you feel better, though I'd really rather you didn't. Or consider it an investment in the gallery manager who's taught me more about art in a month than I learned in 32 years. Sophie was crying now, overwhelmed by the intensity of it all. I love you too. God, I love you so much it terrifies me. Vincent held her as she cried, whispering reassurances against her hair. When she finally pulled back, he was looking at her with such tenderness that her breath caught. Come home with me tonight, he said. Not for anything you're not ready for, just come be with me. I have a guest room if you want space, but I really just want to fall asleep knowing you're close. Sophie nodded, unable to form words. They drove to Vincent's penthouse apartment, and Sophie tried not to gawk at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city or the original artwork on the walls. Vincent gave her one of his shirts to sleep in and showed her the guest room, but Sophie found herself following him to his bedroom instead. They lay together on his massive bed, fully clothed but tangled in each other's arms. Vincent traced patterns on her back while Sophie listened to his heartbeat, and she thought that maybe this was what home felt like. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened in ways Sophie hadn't thought possible. Vincent insisted on helping with her rent, though they compromised by having him pay it as a loan she'd repay when her gallery opened. He started spending more time at her tiny apartment despite having a luxury penthouse, claiming he liked how it felt more lived in, more real. Sophie met his parents over Thanksgiving dinner at their estate outside the city. His mother, a sharp-eyed woman who'd built her own successful interior design firm, pulled Sophie aside after dessert. My son has never looked at anyone the way he looks at you, she said. I've watched a parade of perfectly nice women come and go from his life, and he was always polite but distant. With you, he's present, he's happy. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I'm not doing anything special, Sophie protested. That's exactly it. You're being yourself, and it's enough. More than enough. Vincent's mother squeezed her hand. Welcome to the family, dear. The words stayed with Sophie through the holidays and into the new year. She and Vincent grew closer with each passing day, learning each other's rhythms and habits. He learned she got quiet when she was overwhelmed and needed space to process. She learned he used work as a shield when emotions got too intense and needed gentle coaxing to open up. In February, the gallery hosted its biggest exhibition yet, a showcase of emerging artists that Sophie had spent months organizing. Vincent was there every night of the opening week, watching from the background as Sophie shone in her element. On the final night, after the last guest had left and Sophie was exhausted but glowing with success, Vincent took her hand. I have something to show you, he said. He drove her across the city to a neighborhood in the early stages of revitalization. Old warehouses were being converted into lofts and restaurants, and the streets had that exciting energy of a place on the verge of transformation. Vincent stopped in front of a beautiful brick building with huge windows and soaring ceilings. What is this? Sophie asked. Your gallery. Vincent pulled out a key. If you want it, the building is mine. Well, technically it's ours. I put it in both our names. The space is raw right now, but we can build it out however you want. You can keep working at your current job while you get this started, or you can dive in full time. Whatever feels right. Sophie stared at the building, then at Vincent, unable to process what he was saying. You bought me a gallery, I bought us a future. Your dream, but together. He took her hands. I know it's a lot. I know it's only been 6 months and maybe this is too fast. But Sophie, I want to build a life with you. I want to support your dreams the way you've supported mine. You've made me see the city differently, see art differently, see myself differently. Let me do this for you. For us. Sophie walked into the building, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. She could see it already. White walls covered in carefully curated art, track lighting illuminating each piece perfectly, a small office in the back where she could work on securing artists and planning exhibitions. It was everything she'd ever wanted, handed to her by a man who loved her enough to make it real. It's too much, she whispered, even as her heart soared. It's not nearly enough. Vincent came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Say yes, Sophie. Say yes to the gallery, yes to us, yes to everything we could build together. She turned in his arms, tears streaming down her face. Yes, yes to all of it. Vincent kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Sophie felt like she was finally exactly where she belonged. The next 6 months were chaos in the best possible way. Sophie continued managing her current gallery while slowly transforming the new space. Vincent helped with contractors and permits, but he let all the creative decisions be hers. They spent weekends painting walls and installing lighting, ordering furniture and planning the layout. Sophie's tiny apartment became a staging ground for gallery supplies until Vincent finally convinced her to move into his penthouse. We're going to be spending every waking moment together anyway, he reasoned. And your apartment can't fit all your art books. I measured. Sophie's best friend from college, the only person she'd stayed close with over the years, visited during the move and pulled her aside. I need to make sure you're okay with how fast this is moving. I'm more than okay. I'm happy, Rachel, really, genuinely happy. Rachel studied her face. You are, aren't you? I've never seen you like this. Usually you're so guarded, so worried about being too much or not enough. But with Vincent, you're just yourself. He makes it easy. Sophie glanced over at Vincent, who was carefully packing her books while asking her opinion about where each one should go in his apartment. Their apartment now. He makes everything easy. The gallery opened in September, exactly 1 year after Sophie and Vincent's first date. They called it the Parks Gallery, and it featured work from 12 emerging artists Sophie had been cultivating relationships with for months. The opening night was packed with collectors, critics, and art lovers. Sophie moved through the crowd in a blue dress Vincent had bought her, radiant with joy and pride. Vincent watched from the side, content to let her have this moment. His business partners had joined him, and one clapped him on the shoulder. You were right to buy that building. She's made it into something special. She makes everything special, Vincent said, unable to take his eyes off Sophie as she passionately explained an artist's technique to a potential buyer. Later that night, after everyone had left and they were alone in the gallery, Vincent pulled Sophie into his arms. I'm so proud of you. We did this together. No, I wrote some checks and made some calls. You created this. Your vision, your passion, your connections with the artists, this is all you, Sophie, and it's incredible. Sophie looked around at the walls covered in art, at the gallery that bore her name, at the life she'd built with the man she loved. You know what's funny? I spent so long warning you that you'd get bored of me, that I wasn't exciting enough or interesting enough. But I'm the one who can't get enough. I wake up every morning amazed that you're real, that this is my life. I told you I'd been obsessed for months already. Did you think that was going to change? Vincent smiled. If anything, it's gotten worse. I'm completely gone for you, Sophie Parks. Utterly and irrevocably yours. He dropped to one knee right there in the gallery, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Sophie's hands flew to her mouth. I had this whole elaborate proposal planned at a fancy restaurant, but being here feels right. This is your dream realized, your passion made real, and I want to be part of every dream you chase for the rest of our lives. Vincent opened the box to reveal a stunning ring, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds that caught the gallery lights. Marry me, Sophie. Build this life with me. Let me spend the next 50 years proving that I'll never, ever get bored of you. Sophie was crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, God, yes. Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, lifting her off her feet as he kissed her. They spun around in the middle of the gallery, surrounded by art and possibility and the kind of love that felt like coming home. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the museum's sculpture garden, where Vincent had first told Sophie he loved her. Sophie wore a simple white dress and carried a bouquet of wildflowers. Vincent wore a perfectly tailored suit and cried when she walked down the aisle, not caring who saw. You're supposed to keep it together, Sophie teased as they said their vows. I'm allowed to cry when the most beautiful woman in the world is promising to spend forever with me, Vincent replied, his voice thick with emotion. Their vows were personal and heartfelt. Sophie promised to always challenge Vincent's perspective and drag him to art museums even when he was tired. Vincent promised to support Sophie's dreams and bring her coffee exactly how she liked it every morning. They promised to be honest, to be kind, to choose each other every day even when it was hard. The reception was held at the Parks Gallery, surrounded by the art Sophie had curated. Friends and family danced between the paintings while Sophie and Vincent stayed close together, unwilling to be apart for even a moment. Vincent's mother cornered Sophie at one point and hugged her tightly. "Thank you for loving my son the way he deserves to be loved," she said. "He was successful before you, but he wasn't happy. Now he's both, and that's because of you." "He makes me happy too," Sophie said. "He makes me brave enough to be myself." As the night wound down and guests began to leave, Sophie found Vincent standing in front of the same abstract painting she'd been staring at the night they met. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "That night when I finally worked up the courage to walk into the gallery, I was terrified you'd reject me, that I'd spent months building you up in my head and the reality would disappoint." He turned to face her, his arms coming around her waist. "But the reality was so much better than any fantasy. You're so much better. I still can't believe this is my life sometimes, that I get to wake up next to you, work at a gallery I own, be married to someone who loves me this much. Believe it, Mrs. Sorenson, this is your life now, our life." Sophie smiled at her new name. "I like the sound of that." They stayed at the gallery long after everyone left, slow dancing to music playing from Vincent's phone. Outside the windows, the city lights twinkled, but inside they had everything they needed in each other's arms. 2 years later, Sophie stood in the newly expanded Parks Gallery, her hand resting on her rounded belly. The gallery had grown beyond her wildest dreams, attracting artists and collectors from around the world. She'd hired 2 assistants to help manage the day-to-day operations, giving her time to focus on her newest project, a nonprofit program bringing art education to underprivileged schools. Vincent walked in with takeout from Sophie's favorite Thai restaurant, the one indulgence she allowed herself despite the pregnancy nausea. "How are my 2 favorite people?" "3, Sophie corrected, laughing. "The doctor confirmed it this morning, twins." Vincent nearly dropped the food. "Twins. A boy and a girl. We're having twins, Vincent." He set down the food carefully and crossed to her, falling to his knees and pressing his face against her belly. Sophie ran her fingers through his hair as he spoke softly to their unborn children, telling them about the life they were going to have, the love that was waiting for them. "Are you happy?" Sophie asked. Vincent looked up at her, his eyes shining. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it." "Terrified, excited, grateful, amazed. You've given me everything, Sophie, a home, a purpose, and now a family." "We gave it to each other," Sophie said, pulling him to his feet. "Everything we have, we built together." The twins were born in early spring, a boy they named Victor and a girl they named Stella. Vincent took a month off work, the first real break he'd taken in his entire career, to be home with Sophie and the babies. They stumbled through those first exhausting weeks together, learning how to soothe 2 crying infants at once, surviving on minimal sleep and maximum love. Sophie's life had transformed so completely from that rainy night 3 years ago that sometimes she had to remind herself it was real. She had a husband who adored her, 2 perfect children, a successful gallery, and a sense of purpose she'd never imagined possible. The woman who'd been eating ramen to survive and covering holes in her walls with posters felt like a different person, though Sophie knew she was still in there somewhere, just grown and changed and loved into this new version of herself. One evening, when the twins were 6 months old and finally sleeping through the night, Sophie and Vincent sat together on their penthouse balcony. The city stretched out before them, full of lights and life and possibility. Do you remember when I warned you that you'd get bored of me?" Sophie asked. Vincent pulled her closer. "I remember. I also remember telling you I'd been obsessed for months already. And now I've had 3 years to get to know every part of you, the way you organize the gallery schedule with color-coded charts. How you cry at diaper commercials since the twins were born. The fact that you still straighten frames obsessively even though you own the gallery now. The way you hum while you're reading about art history." He kissed her temple. "And I'm more obsessed than ever." "You haven't bored me for a single second, Sophie. You've amazed me, challenged me, loved me, and given me a life I didn't know I was missing. That's the opposite of boring." Sophie thought about everything they'd built together. The gallery that had become one of the city's most respected art venues. The children sleeping peacefully in the next room. The quiet, steady love that had only deepened with time. She'd spent so much of her life believing she wasn't enough that anyone who really knew her would eventually lose interest. But Vincent had proven that wrong every single day for 3 years. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too. Always have, always will." They sat together as the sun set over the city, two people who'd found each other against all odds and built something beautiful. Sophie had warned him he'd get bored, but Vincent had been right. Obsession didn't fade when it was based on something real, something deep, something true. If anything, it only grew stronger with time, transforming into the kind of love that lasted a lifetime. And they had a lifetime ahead of them, full of art and children and quiet moments and grand gestures and every beautiful thing that came with choosing each other every single day. Sophie had stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, stopped wondering when Vincent would realize she wasn't worth the effort. Because he'd shown her, over and over, that she was worth everything. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Vincent took Sophie's hand and brought it to his lips. "Thank you for taking a chance on me that rainy night. Thank you for walking through the gallery door," Sophie replied. It was the simplest truth and the most important one. Sometimes love was just showing up, taking the risk, and trusting that what you felt was real. Sometimes it was a millionaire who'd spent months working up the courage to introduce himself to a gallery manager who thought she was too ordinary to be loved. Sometimes it was finding out that ordinary was exactly what someone had been searching for all along. Their story had started with obsession and a warning, but it had become something neither of them could have predicted. Something richer and deeper and more real than any fantasy. Something worth every risk, every vulnerable moment, every leap of faith. Something that would last forever. And as they headed inside to check on their sleeping children, Sophie knew with absolute certainty that she'd never doubt it again. This love, this life, this man who'd refused to believe she was anything less than extraordinary. It was all real, all hers, all theirs. And it was never going to end.